to this YouTube channel. My name is Shekina Chukufila and I'm delighted to receive you here. In this video, I will show you how to implement Firebase MultiFactor Authentication. Before to do that, let me first show you a demo of this video. The application we are going to build will allow the user to create an account with his email and password, or to use a Gmail account through Google provider. After that, the user will be able to connect to his account through the login page. Once the user is connected, he will be also able to do two things. The first one, to disconnect from his account. The second thing, to activate the second factor authentication. Once this is done, the user will be obligated to connect to his account through two steps. The first one, the user will provide his email and password or his Gmail account through Google provider, and the second step, the user will be able to provide the code he will receive through his phone number. Let's just have a look on that. In my account, I have to go to the sign up page. For that, I have to click on sign up just here. Once I'm on this page, I have to create my account. For this first time, I will do that with my Gmail account through Google provider. Let me click on. I will be redirected to a page where I have to choose which account I have to use. In my case, I will use the first one. After that, I have created my account successfully and I can see the user page. As I said previously, I'm able to do two things: to disconnect from my account or to activate directly my multi-factor authentication. In my case, I will activate directly the multi-factor authentication. I'm in this page, so I need to provide my phone number. Don't forget to provide your phone number with your country indicator. Once my phone number provided, I will be able to receive a code. And let me just have a look on my code and to provide that. My code is 28 26, and I would submit the code. Once it's done, my second factor authentication is created and activated as wanted. So I have to disconnect from my account to see if everything was set correctly. I will disconnect from my account and I'm get back to my login page. To verify if everything is set correctly, I have to connect to my account with the Google provider. Let's click on login with Google. And I will use the same email I've used to create my account. It's the first one in my case. After that, I will see this page and have to fill the code I've received through my number. I will provide the code 0056 and 63, and I have to submit that. As I said, this time I go through two steps to get in user page, and I will do the same thing with my email and password account. Let's create another account with email and password. We are going to do the same thing with the second authentication provider. So we are going to create our page with an email and a password. Let's go again to the sign up page. Okay, now we are seeing our sign up page. I have to provide an email and a password for to create my account. When it's done, I'm logging on my user page. You can notice something different. For this time, I have to verify first my email before to do anything else. In the case I want to create the second factor authentication, let me click on verify your email. We can see the notification email sent. I have to verify my email to see if I've received a link from Google to verify my email, for to see if I can create a second factor authentication. So to verify my email address, I have to click on that. And when I'm inside of the email, I can see this link and I will click on the link. After that, I can see a notification, your email has been verified. You can now sign in with your new account. So I can close this page, connect from my account to verify if everything is set correctly. I will use the same account and I log in successfully. In this case, I can see activate the multi-factor authentication. And this time I will click again on the same link. And I have to provide my phone number. And I have to verify that. A code has been sent on my phone number. Let me take the code. The code is 302103. And I have submit that. In this case, I have created a second factor authentication. Let's verify that. And for that, I will disconnect from my account. Let me connect again on my account. Once it's done, I have to provide the code I have received before to get in on my account. I will wait a little bit for the code, and 84, 63, and 85. I have to submit that, and everything is okay. As you can see, my multi-factor authentication is set. Now we are jumping into the code for to create this application. I created a brand new Nextjs application and I will use with that some package. Let me show you that on my packages. So for this demo, I will use Nextjs 13. I will use Force React for the icon. I will use Firebase, obviously. I will also use TypeScript, React Autos for notification, and Tile1 CSS for styling. To show you that is a brand new application I've created, let me run the application. I will start my application and I'm able now to see that in my navigator. I can see Firebase MultiFactor Authentication. To continue with our implementation, we have to set a new Firebase project. So let's create a new Firebase project. We can give this project a name, Firebase MultiFactor Authentication, and we can continue. So for this project, we don't need Google Analytics, so I will disable that. I will create my project. So my project is ready. I can continue. I will click on continue. Okay, everything is okay. So for this demo, I will use just authentication from Firebase. Let's go to build, and here I will click on authentication. I have to get started with my authentication product, so let me create on get started. After that, for this project, I will use two providers. I will use email and password. I have just to enable that. Save. And I have to add another provider. So add a new provider. I will use this time Google provider. So I have to enable Google provider, and I can configure that with my personal email, and I will save. So as you can see, I have my email and password and Google provider. In our case, we have to upgrade to enable the multi-factor authentication. So we have to click here, upgrade to enable, and you will see upgrade to the new authentication. You can read the information written there, and you can click on next. I will keep it on my free plan, and I will upgrade to the new authentication. So everything is set. You can see SMS multi-factor authentication allow your user to add an extra layer of security to their account. So the status is disabled. We will change that. We'll enable that, and we can save. The multi-factor authentication is enabled, so we can get back into our code. Projects, we have now to initialize this Firebase project into our Nextjs application. So to do that, I will create a folder called Firebase. Inside that folder, I will put a file. I will call it init. So what I have to do here, I have to go to my Firebase dashboard to take the credential. Let's go. I have to click here and to click to project settings. After that, I have to create a new project, so it will be a web project. I will click here, and I will call it Firebase MFA, Firebase MFA and web, Firebase hosting, and I will register just my app. After that, I will skip this information and I will continue to the console. After that, I will go to the bottom of the page. I will see Firebase config here. I will copy that and paste that in here. I have my config here, and I have now to set my Firebase. To initialize my project, I will create a variable app. Okay. And after that, what I will do, I will check first if there is any application, there is no instance of Firebase. So I will check if there is no instance of Firebase, and if there is no instance of Firebase, I will use initialize here, okay, from Firebase, and I will use Firebase config. Otherwise, I will put in my app the instance already present here. So after that, I will export this app I will export app. So everything is set and our Firebase is initialized. So the next step, we will create the sign up page of our application. To create our sign up page, I will go to page and I will create a new file. I will call it sign up and create a function, call it sign up page, and inside I will return a component I will create after this moment. Sign up, I will call it sign up. Let's create that component. So I will go to my file and create a file inside of component, and its name will be sign up. And I will export function, call it sign up, and here I will export, call just a div sign up. So we can get back into our page and call these components. So everything now is fine. We're going to check that here and go to the sign up. Okay, export. Oh yeah, I made a mistake here. Into my page I have to export this as default, so we can get back and everything is okay. So sign up. Okay, so let's create our sign up page. So I will create quickly our sign up page and we'll get back. I've built our sign up page. As you can see, that's on my navigator here. We have a beautiful page, and what you are going to do next is to create some function to allow user to create this account with Google provider or email and password. Let's go that. So for that, I will create in my Firebase folder a new file I will call authentication. So inside this, I will create a function that will be a sync function, and I will call it sign in with Google. Okay, and it will return a promise, and that promise will be any. And what I will do next, I will put in try catch our method. This method I will call it from Firebase sign in with pop-up. So here inside this application, I will use off. The first parameter should be a off. What you have to do is to create that. To create that here, let me create a variable of. It will be off. Okay, and inside I will use get off function, and inside I will use app from our init. Okay, and here I will get back to my function. Here I will pass off, and the second parameter will be new Google provide off provider. So I can provide that, and if everything is correct, I will return just a true, and otherwise here I will return the error. Okay, and the second function I will create for our user, I will call it, it will be also in a sync function, and I will call it sign up, and inside of this function I will take two parameters. I will take two parameters. First will be the email, that will be a string. The second will be a password, it's also a string. So inside this function, after getting two parameter email, that is string and password, what I have to do is to create, I will put it in the try catch, and I will just wait for create user with email and password. I will use this function from Firebase that's coming with the SDK. And what I will do, I will pass first the auth, and after that I will pass the email, and I will pass the password. So if everything is okay and work properly, I will return it true, but otherwise I will catch the error here, and I will get the error, and I will return false. So in this case, I will return, my return type is promise. Oh, yes, promise boolean. Okay, so let me remove this. We have two important functions, and we'll integrate that on our sign-up page. After creating two functions in my authentication, what I have to do is to create also two async function here. I will start first with this first function. I will call login with Google. So inside this function, what I will do is to get the response from my first function is sign in with Google. If you remember, I have used this function in authentication. I have created this function in authentication, and I will get the response from this one. So the sign in with Google will return us a true or an error. In this case, I will check if the response is not returning true, and in that case I will create a notification to the user, and inside this notification I will create something went wrong. Okay, let's just check what's wrong. Okay, I just write correctly response. So why I use this notification? This notification is just an implementation of Toast here. As you can see, this function will help me to pop up an information to the user in the top right of his screen. So this is for the first function, and I will create the second function. But before to create the second function, let me first bind this function to the click method. So here on click, when the user will click on this button, we will execute this function. Before to move forward, what I have to do is to create a custom hook. In that custom hook, I will check if the user is connected, because when our user will create his account, his session will be set. So to do that, I will create a new file. I will put that inside a folder, and this file I will call it use current user. Okay, and inside this custom hook I will export my function, and I will call it use current user. What I will do inside, I will create a state hook. I will create current, I'll call it current user, and I will use set current user, and I will use a use state. Inside my use state, I will create three types. I will call it, the first one will be user, okay, because if the user is connected, Firebase will return as a user type, or a null when the user is not connected. And I will add another type. I will call it loading. And when we are starting our application, it will be loading. So I will create an effect here. Inside my effect, use on-off state change. This function is coming with the SDK of Firebase, and inside of this function, it will allow us to know if the user did or not. I have to use authentication, so let us get back into the authentication and export this. And I will come here. The first information I will get here is the auth, and this auth will come from authentication. Inside of that, I will use a method. I will get a user for this method, and I can set the current user here. Okay, so this function is returning something. Okay, it's returning a unsubscribe. Just use a function. We'll call it unsubscribe. Okay, right, and we will unsubscribe when this custom hook is unmounted. Great. And this method can return the current user. So in this case, we know when the user is connected or not. Okay, right. And I'm getting back again in my SignUp pay component. Inside my SignUp component, what I will do next is to get the email and password. What I have to do for that, I have to create two reference. I will bind that with my form. So the first one, I will call it email, and I will use a reference. That reference will be an HTML input element, and the default value will be no. So let me just import this. Don't forget to import that here. And the second thing, I will call it password, and inside, and I will create also a use ref. It will be also the HTML input element, and it will be null as a default value. What I have to do next is to bind this reference with my form. So I'm going downside and just look, here is an email. What I have to do is to create a ref. I will call it email. And for my password, I will create also a ref. I will call it, bind it with password. Okay, great. So now we can create our function. Our function, we will call it async function. It will be a async function, and the name will be create an account. And here, as we are working with our formula, what you have to do is to pass an event. Okay, and this event, the type will be a form event. Inside the form event, I will put HTML form element. So as is my email, what I have to prevent default, what I have to do here is to bind that function with onSubmit method. So my method is create an account. The function is create an account, and I will continue here. What I will do, I will check first if my email is set and if the password also is set. Okay, and if everything is correct, I can now get the response from my function I have used. I call this function SignUp. Okay, and inside my function, I will give email current, so I can get the value, password, current, that value. So what I have to check here is if the response is different from true, I have to notify my user that something went wrong. But in your case, you found the proper words to describe your error to the user. So I will call it create an account. So another question is, when our user is connected, we have to redirect him to a new page. We will call it user page. Let us create the page, and inside of page, and call it user. Okay, default, don't forget to set it as a default, and we'll return, let's create a div user. Okay, that is it. And don't forget that you have a sign up page. In this sign up page, we'll start to listen to the use current user. It will allow us to know if the user is connected or not. And inside this page, we will redirect our user once he created his account. Let's do that. So in our case, I will create a variable. I will call it current user, and I will use current user, because this is returning us the current user if he's connected or not. And we will use also a router provided by Nextjs application. And what I will do here is to verify if the current user, the state of current user is loading. I have to return a loading component. Okay, we will create this component later. Let's create this component now. And here inside, we will create a loading component. Okay, it will be a function loading, and we will return some information. So in my case, I will set up quickly this loading page. As you can see, I've created my loading component, and now I can import that inside my signup page. So let's import that. Okay, and when the user will be set, in this case, we have to redirect the user to the user page. I will void return push, and inside of this information, I will redirect the user to the user page. Now let's test our application to verify if everything is working properly. To do that, what I will do is to use my Google provider. I will click. As you can see, I'm redirected to this page, and I will choose the first email here. And I have been redirected to the user page because now I'm connected. As I'm connected, let us implement the deconnection and the login page of our application. We are going to create our logout function. So to do that, I will go to the authentication, and I will create a new function, a new async function. I will call it logout. So here what I will do, I will put in try catch. I will wait for the sign out function provided by the SDK of Firebase, and inside I will put it off. And if I'm signed out properly, I will return a true. Otherwise, I will get the error, and I will return false information. As in a sync function, it will be a promise of boolean. I'll get back to my user page. What I will do here is I will change the name to user page, and I will create a user component. Let's create our component and call it user. Our component be user. So I will export a function. That function will be named user, and inside of my function I will put some style for the page. Let's create that page. I've created just a simple page, and to fix this issue here in the user page, what I have to do is to import my component. Okay, let's now visualize the page on our navigator. As you can see, I have a user page, a simple user page with a disconnect button. Nothing is happening when I'm clicking on this button. So let's create the function to disconnect to his account. I will create that function in the user component. So the function, I will call it, let me just create a function. The name of the function will be disconnect, and here I will not care about the return of this function, logout. Okay, so let's bind that on click logout. We are going to test when I will disconnect the user. So nothing will happen because we don't redirect the user when he's not connected. Cool. Let's do that here. What you have to do is to get again the current user on the page, use current user. What I have to check is if the state of the current user is loading. What I have to do is to return a loading component. If the user is not connected, if the current user state is null, in that case I will create a router here. I will get an instance of a router from Nextjs, provide for Nextjs next router, and here I will redirect the user to the login page. Let's now create the login page. I will create my login page here in page, and I will create login information. Inside of this page, I will create a default. I will export a default function. I will call it login. And what I have to return here, I will just return something simple for the moment. I will call it login. So if the user disconnects from his account, it will be redirected to this login page. Let's check that on our navigator. Okay, as you can see, the user is redirected to the login page because he's not connected. What you have to do next is to build our login page so the user who created his account can be able to connect into his account. Let's build a page of login. Let's do that now. To do that, what I have to do is to create my new component, and the new component, I will call it login. Call it login, and I will export a function. I will call it login, and I will create my page. So to avoid any problem, I will call this login page. Call it login page, and here we are going to set our page. As you can see, I've just created my components, the login component. Let's import that in the login page. Here, what I will do, I will call my loading component, and we can test just on our navigator to see if everything is okay. As you can see, a clean login page, and I can go to my sign up page and I can get back to my login. Oh, just an error. Let me get back into my login. Just change that in the sign up. Here, I will call it login. Okay, so it's becoming more simple, and I will create login sign up. Okay, so what I have to do here, I have to give to our user the possibility to log into his account with Google provider or with his email and password. I will start with Google. I will do that into my login page, and we understand why in a few minutes. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a function. It will be an async function, and that async function, I will call it login with Google. And inside this function, I will get the response from our function called sign in with Google. If the response is true, okay, if the response is true, what I have to do, I have to redirect my user to the user page. For that, I have first to call a router here from Nextjs, and I will use that here. I will wait for that. Push user. Okay. Here is response. Okay. Otherwise, the user will stay here. I can just say else. I will say something went wrong. Okay, cool. What I have to do next is to allow the user to create his account with email and password. Let's create that function too. What you have to do is to create an async function. That async function, we call it login with email and password. So for this case, we are getting back to the authentication to create this function to allow the user to create his account with email and password. Just create export. We'll export the function. We'll export an async function. The name will be login. We'll get the email and the password. And inside of this function, I will use a try catch, okay, to catch the error. If there is an error, I will return that error. So here it will be a promise of any. And what we are going to do here, we are going to await, okay, and to use sign in with email and password. This function coming from our Firebase SDK. What you have to provide is the host, after that the email and the password. Is everything go correctly? We are returning a true value, okay? And here into the use, no, not the user page, we are getting back to the login. Now we can get this to get the response. Call that response, and instead of this response, I will use this function I've created and I will provide the email. No, email. I have to provide here an email, sorry, and a password. Cool. And here I will give the email and the password. After that, I have to check if the response is true. In this case, I will redirect the user. Okay, here is response. I will redirect the user to the user page. Okay, right. Otherwise, else, what I will do, I will notify the user something went wrong. All right, something went wrong. And what we have to do here, we are going to pass these two functions to our components login. So we are going to pass them as props. Let's do that right now. We are going to use our two props. The first one, we will call it login with Google. Let me copy and paste that, and it will be login with Google. And the second will be login with email and password. Let me copy and paste that, and it will be login with email and password. After that, we are going to our components and we are going to create a props. Let's start first with a type. We are going to create a type. We call it props. And instead of this type, what we are going to set is a function that will get an email is a string, and password is also a string, and it will return okay, it will return nothing. And we are taking also login with Google. Okay, it's also a function that will get nothing, and the return type will be void. Okay, what you are going to do here next is to use that props. What you are going to do is to say that you are getting that props, and you can use them, login with Google and login with email and password. Okay, so we can now bind on click event. We are going to bind what? Login with Google. And in our case here, we have a formula. What we will do is to create another function inside this component. Let's create that function. We are going to create a function. That function will call it handle submit. And instead of this function, we'll use an event. Okay, we use an event. We'll get an event because we are working with a formula, and this event, what will be inside of this event, it will be a form event. Inside this form event, we'll put an HTML form element, and inside going to prevent default. Okay, and we are going also to create two ref. The first one, we will call it email. Use ref. It will be an HTML input element, and the default value will be null. And let's import used ref, so it's imported there. And we are going also to create a second variable. We'll call it password, and we'll use also the reference. And here is the HTML input element, and the default value, it will be a null. So we are going down, and we can see here is an input element. So an email, you can just reference to the email, and the password will reference that to the password. What you are going to do next is to use the onSubmit event here and to call under submit. Okay, that is done. Everything is correct now. Okay, we have this information, and let's try this in our navigator. I'm going to test out if everything is okay. Okay, as you can see, I'm redirected to my user page. Now I can disconnect from my account. I will get back here. Now you are going to set up an option to activate the second factor authentication or the multi-factor authentication. To do that, you have to check two things. The first thing, the user should not be enrolled to the multi-factor authentication. And the second thing, we are going to verify if the current user has an email verified. To do that, we are going to get a user here. What you are going to do is to come here and to take the current user. Let me do that here, current user, and it will be current user. Okay, and get back to our page. What you are going to do is to create a props type. We'll call it props. Inside this props, we'll call it current user, and the type will be user. This user is coming from Firebase. This is user component, call it user component just to avoid user is coming from Firebase. And inside our user component, what we are going to do is we're going to get our props and is current user. What we are going to do now is to verify if the current user have an email verified. And the second thing, what you are going to do is to verify if the user is not enrolled. So let's create a new function inside our authentication that verify if the user is enrolled or not. To do that, go to our authentication, and we are going to create a new function. We are going to export our function, and we call it verify if user is enrolled. All right, so what you are getting a user. Okay, and here what you are going to check, you are going to verify if enrolled factor. Okay, we are creating a function. Enrolled factor is going to be, we are going to call a multi-factor. Say that multi-factor is coming from Firebase authentication. We'll pass the user and we will get the enrolled factor, and we will return the enrolled factor if its length is superior than 0. Our user is enrolled. So what you are going to do now, you are going to get back here and to verify if the user is not enrolled. In our case is current user. Okay, we are going to redirect the user to the page to allow the user to create the second factor authentication. Let's do that. So I've created a link to a page. I will call it MFA, so I can say multi-factor authentication, so I can redirect my user there and it can create his second factor authentication. To do that, let me create a new page, call it multi-factor authentication, and inside this I will call default multi-factor authentication page. Is a function. Okay, what I will return for the moment, I will just return a div. Instead of the div, I will say okay, MFA. Let's get back here. Everything is okay. Here I have changed the name. Let me just change that to user component, and here is user component, and here is the current user. Let me write it properly, current user. Now everything should be okay. Okay, say that it can be no. So okay, here I have to change my props because this type can be no. Okay, and what I have to do is to check if the current user exists, and we are ready to go. Okay, now check if everything is okay. Everything now is okay. Cool. Let's just test that on our navigator if the user is able to see the multi-factor page. Let me log in again. Something went wrong. Oh, I made a mistake here. Where the error occur in the login page. The error is here, so let's change that. So we are going to connect to our account. Let's connect to our account. And now we can see activate the multi-factor authentication. When I click on that, I can see my page. Good. Let's now build this page, multi-factor authentication, in our application. So to create this page, what you are going to do, we are going first to verify if the user coming to this page is connected. To do that, we are going again to get the current user, use current user, and we are going also to use the router provided by Nextjs. Okay, and we are going to verify if the state of the current user is loading. In this case, we are going to return the loading, and if there is no user, we have to redirect the user to the loading page, the login page. Let's do that. What you are going to do is to void the return type of the router, and we will push to the login page. Okay, great. After that, we are going to create a component. That component, we will call it create multi-factor authentication. What we are going to do now is to create that multi-factor authentication. Let's do that. We are going into our component and create a new component. We'll call it create multi-factor authentication, right? And it will be a function create multi-factor authentication. We are going to pass him the current user. As I said, we have to pass him the current user. What you are going to do is to create a new type, type props, we call it props, and inside we'll create current user and can be user from authentication. Okay, and what we are going to do here, we are going to get our current user props and can get our current user. For the moment, let me just create a div and say component created. What we are going to do here, we are going to do two things. To create a second factor authentication, we should verify the user with our reCAPTCHA. So what we are going to do, we are going to create a custom hook that will generate our reCAPTCHA into this page. Let's create this hook right now. We will call this hook use reCAPTCHA. Okay. Inside this hook, we are going to use a function and we call it use reCAPTCHA, and we will set up the component ID. Okay, and we understand why. Component ID, the name of the component ID will be a string, and inside of this component ID, what you are going to do, component ID. Inside of our component ID, what we are going to do, we are going to set our reCAPTCHA, set reCAPTCHA use state. We are going to use a state, and the type of this reCAPTCHA will be application verifier from Firebase Authentication. Okay, so inside of our use effect, we are going to create a function. Inside this function, we are going to create a variable. We'll call it reCAPTCHA verifier, and inside this we'll create a reCAPTCHA verifier from Firebase auth, and we'll call the component ID, and we'll pass some parameter. The first parameter, it will be the size. In our case, it will be, we will use invisible, and after that we use a callback, and inside of our callback we'll call nothing, and here we are going to call our auth. It will come from authentication, so everything is correct now. And what we are going to do after that, we can now set the reCAPTCHA verifier. When this use custom hook is unmounted, we have to clear this reCAPTCHA. So return the cleanup function. Instead of the cleanup function, we will call reCAPTCHA verifier that clear. Right. Okay. And here, what we are going to do is to put in our array dependency, we'll put component ID. We are going to return this reCAPTCHA. Okay, let's now use this reCAPTCHA in our create multi-factor authentication component. Before everything else, we have now to create this page. To create the multi-factor authentication, the first thing, the user should be able to provide his phone number, and the second thing, he should provide the code he will receive via his phone number. Now let's create the phone registration component, and we are going to create also the code sign up component. But before that, let us create our recaptcha, the recaptcha of this page. Recaptcha. Use recaptcha, and we are going to use SignUp. SignUp will be just the name of a div we will create here. Okay, let's do that. We'll create a div, and its ID will be SignUp. Let's just copy paste to be sure that we have written that well. Cool. And as I said, we have to verify, we have to create two components, phone registration and code sign up. Let's do that. I will create first phone registration. Okay, it will be a function. No, it will be phone registration. Okay, I will return a page I will build. Let's build that page. So we have created phone registration component. Let's call it into our create multi-factor authentication. Phone registration, and let's have a look on our navigator. Load the page. What's going on here? Just have a look. Oh, okay. We can now call our components create multi-factor authentication, and we can pass it current user. And yeah, it can be no, and in this case we have to say no. Okay, now we can see we have a different page, and we can provide a phone number, and to verify this phone number, or the user can cancel and to get back to our user page. Let's implement that. What you have to do is go to phone registration, getting an instance of a router, okay, and when the users click on cancel, on click, the user should be able to get back router that push, get back to the user page. Okay, let's test that. If I click on cancel, I can get back to my user page. When I click on activate the multi-factor authentication, I can see this page. Okay, right. What you have to do next, find his phone number and to send him the code. Let's implement the function will help us to do that. I will lift my state into the parent component. So the parent component here is the create multi-factor authentication, and I'm going to build a function. What I'm going to do is to create first a ref. I will show you how I will do that. I will call it phone number, and here I'll use a ref. Okay, and to be a no default value, and it's HTML input element. Okay, and I have now to bind the reference here, and I will call it phone number. Once I get this information here, what I have to do, I have to use another function. I will call it function, I will call it handle click. If the phone number that's current, if the phone number is not null, the current information is not null, I will create a function. I will call this function phone number, get phone number. Okay, and I will pass that what the user, the value of the phone number. Okay, what I have to do is to create a props type. I will call it props, and I will use get phone number here. It will get a phone number that is a string and return a void. Okay, and here I can call that props, and it's get phone number. I have to use this get phone number in my create multi-factor authentication. I have to create a function. I will call it get phone number. Okay, it will get a phone number, and I will pass that here. Get phone number, get phone number. Okay, I will now bind this information with the send here, this function. On click here, I will use handle click. Right. Okay, now we have to create in our authentication file the method that will help us to verify the phone number. To verify the phone number, as I said, I have to create a new function. Here I will call it, I will export a function. I will call it verify phone number, and what I will pass in this function, I will give user information to be a user, should be a user for Firebase authentication. What I will provide next, it will be the phone number and the reCAPTCHA verifier. Okay, and the type is application verifier. The phone number will be the string, a string. So what you are going to do here, we are going to get a session. So create a variable, we'll call it multi-factor session, and we are going to await. So to use our await, we have to use an async, and we can await here to multi-factor, and we'll pass it to the user, and we'll get the session. Okay, and after that we are going to create a phone info option. So let's create a phone info option. What we'll put inside, we'll put a phone number, and our session, it will be, I can just call it here, I can call it, it will be multi-factor session. Okay, yes, I can call it session here, it will become more simple. Okay, session. What we are going to do next, we are going now to create the phone of provider. To do that, we have to create phone of provider, and here we are going to create a new phone of provider, and we are going to pass our authentication. Inside our try catch, we are going to return the response if everything went well. We are returning a phone of provider. We can verify the phone number. What we are going to pass is the phone option and the reCAPTCHA verifier. Otherwise, what you are going to do is to catch the error, and inside we can return false. Okay. The verified phone number is returning us a promise of a string. So here the type will be promise of false or string. Cool. Let's now use that inside our create multi-factor authentication component. What we are going to do here, we are going to do this. We are going to verify if the current user is null and or the reCAPTCHA is null, will do nothing. Okay. Otherwise, we are going to get the verification ID that is getting a string from a wait that will be in a async function, because verified phone number is an async function. This will be also async await verify phone number. Okay, here what we have to pass, we pass the current user. We are going also to pass the phone number we have get, and we are going to pass our reCAPTCHA. All right. If our verification ID is false, we can notify to the user that something went wrong. Else, we need this verification ID to send to the user a code. So we'll create a state here, code ID, set verification code ID, and it will be a state. That state will be null by default, so it can be, let me do that, it can be string or null. Right, so if everything is correct here, we are going to set our verification code ID to pass it verification ID. Okay, what are we going to do? If the verification ID is null, we are going to display the phone registration. But if the verification ID is set, we are going now to display the code SignUp component. Let me first do this. If the verification code ID does not exist, I can put my phone registration. Otherwise, if I have a verification code ID here, I will display another component. Let's first create that component. We'll call it code SignUp. Okay, we are going to export our function, and the name will be code SignUp. Now we are going to build a component that will help us to retrieve code. Let's do that, and we'll call it code. We're going to create a new component. We'll call it code, and inside of our code, we'll create a props, we call it code, and here what we are going to do, we are creating a new type, we call it props. Instead of this type, we will call code get code. It will be a function that's getting a code as a string and return void. So what you are going to do here, we are going to set up our component. Let's do that. So what I do here, on creating this component, I've just created a component that will help me to display some information. Let me show you that on the navigator. So I will get back here to explain you what I've done here. Let's just check that, and we'll call code SignUp. And code SignUp. Instead of my code SignUp, I will return code. Yeah. So here I will create a function. No, I'll create a function. I will call it get code with the code that is a string, and here I will put get code. Okay, here I can use code SignUp. What I did here, I've just created a page, a component that will help me to get information from the user. When the user will get a code via his phone number, he can use that here inside. So what I have to do, I can refuse to provide that code, and if I cancel the operation, I have to put on click event. I have to avoid the router push. It should get back to the user page. All right, but otherwise what you have to do, I should execute here a function. I will call it handle click. Let's create this function. I will call it handle click. Inside that function, I will get the code. I will call it final code. As the code is an array, what I have to do is to use reduce function. And here, what I have to do is to get the previous value and the current value. And inside, what I have to do is to return the previous value, and I will concatenate that with the current value. And what I have to do here, I have to execute now get code, and I will get the final code that is a string. Okay, we are getting back here, and we need two information. The first information we need here, we need the current user. Okay, we use the current user and the verification ID, verification code ID. It will be the verification code ID. Okay, let's create these two props. I will create a new type. I will call it again props, and I will use this information. Okay, let me just put that correctly. Here it will be a user for Firebase auth, and here it will be a string. Okay. Here we are going to pass these two props. Okay. And current user and verification code ID. All right. So we can continue our implementation. Now we are going to implement this function get code. Inside of the get code, what you are going to do, we are going to check our code. First things we have to do is to enroll the user. If the user provides a correct code, now the user will be able to be enrolled to the second factor authentication. Let's create an async function. We export an async function. We'll call it enroll user, and it will take user as a parameter. The verification code ID it will be a string, a verification code that also will be a string. And what we are going to do next, we are going to get the phone auth credential. And here, what you are going to do, we are going to use a phone auth provider and get the credential. Going to get the verification code ID and the verification code. After that, we have to create we get an assertion. It will be a phone multi-factor generator here, and the assertion will be the phone auth credential. And we are going to execute this, going to await for multi-factor. We are going to pass the user, and we are going to enroll the user. We are going to use multi-factor assertion, and we are going to use a display name. In our case, we are going to call that personal phone number. And if everything went well, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we have to catch the error, and we are going to return false. So we have now to use this function, enroll the user, to inside of, let me first close this, and this. Going to go to SignUp. This function, we can say that it will be in a async function, and we can get a response. Inside this response, we're going to execute a enroll user, and we are going to pass the current user, the verification code ID, and the code. Right. So if the second factor authentication is set, the user can be redirected to the user page. To do that, we have to check if the response is true, and we can do that. To do that again, we have to get an instance of a router, use router from Nextjs router, and await for router that push user page. If the operation failed, we have to notify the user that something went wrong. Okay, so in our case, create multi-factor authentication is set. Let's now test this function. Let me provide my phone number. Correct. I will provide my phone number. Okay. Now I will receive a code. I have received a code. Let me provide that. And as you can see, I'm correctly enrolled to the second factor authentication. Let's test that. I will disconnect from my account and I will log in again. So as you see, they say that something went wrong. It's normal. Why? Because there is an error that occurred. Just let's check on our code. Let's now display what is going on here. Let us display the response. Okay. When I'm trying to log in, I see an error here. They say off multi-factor authentication required. So everything is set up correctly. Now let us handle this error. We'll get back into our code and let us create another function. And this function will create an async function and we'll call it handle multi-factor authentication. You will get a response that is any, and I will verify if the response that code equal to, I can copy past this, or there is something went wrong. We have to check. In this time, we have to check if the error code is this. Now, verify the second factor authentication. We can send to the user now a code. We are going to create inside of our authentication file another function, an async function, and we will call it verify user second factor, verify user multi-factor authentication. So what this function will take as parameter, this function will take the error. Okay, it will be a multi-factor error and the reCAPTCHA verifier, the application verifier, and selected index. So when you have this error, you should select the second factor authentication you have set. But in our case, we will use just the first one, that will be the phone number. But let me create that. Here inside of the function, what you are going to do, we are going to get our resolver, get multifactor resolver, and inside multifactor resolver, what you are going to pass is the auth and the error. Okay. Here is get multifactor resolver from Firebase auth. Okay. If the resolver int on the selected index that factor ID it equal to phone multifactor generator that factor ID. So what you are checking here, we are checking if the user has set the phone number as his second factor authentication. And if it's that, we have to create a phone info option. Inside the info phone option, we are going to create some information, multifactor int. Okay, inside multifactor int, what you are going to pass will be resolver int selected index. Okay, and the second option will be the session, and the session will be the resolver dot session. Okay, great. We have to get the phone of provider. It will come from our phone of provider, and we pass the auth we created before. And we are going to execute the function here. We are going to take again the verification ID, and we will await for the phone of provider that dot verify the number. What you are going to do is to pass the phone option, info option, if the recapture verifier, and we will return the verification. We call it verification ID. We return the verification ID and the resolver. So if, let me correct that. So here it will be a promise of false or verification ID as a string and a resolver as a multifactor resolver from Firebase. It's verification ID, or we can just say it can be void. Okay, now we can get back here. So we are going to get our response from verifier user multifactor authentication. Inside, what you are going to pass here, I can call it data to avoid any collision. And here we are going to pass the response. We are going to pass the second step will be the reCAPTCHA. We have to create our reCAPTCHA here. What you are going to do, we are going to create our reCAPTCHA. Let me create a div with ID sign in. Let us create a reCAPTCHA here. reCAPTCHA is going to use reCAPTCHA, and I will take this sign in and I will give that there. Okay, and here I will use reCAPTCHA, and the index will be 0. So I have just to check that the reCAPTCHA is not now. Okay, to check that the reCAPTCHA is set. After that, here inside, what I'm going to do is to check if data is false. And if it's false, I have to notify my user that something went wrong. Okay. In the case that everything works well, I can now destructure my data. I will get the verification ID and the resolver. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create two states. The first one, I will call it verification ID. The second, I will call it resolver. Let's do that now. I'm going to create two states. Verification ID and set verification. Let me just write correctly. Verification ID and set verification ID. There are state, use state, it is string. Okay, and resolver, set resolver, it's a state, and by default will be undefined, but the type is multifactor resolver. Great. So here what I have to do is to set verification ID by verification ID and set resolver as resolver. If we don't get this error, we have to display to the user that something went wrong. Let's do that here. Else, I have to send a notification, something went wrong. So in our case, we'll be able to receive a code, and after that we have to create another component that will help the user to provide the code he has received on his phone number. So let's create the component. We'll call it code sign-in, and here we will display this login if there is no verification ID and there is no resolver. Okay, I'm going to display the login page, but in our case, if we have a verification ID and we have a resolver, we are going to create a code sign-in. Let's create first that component. We'll call it code sign-in. Code sign-in. export function and get back here and call code signing. Okay, what code signing will require? It will require the verification ID and the resolver. Cool. Go to the code signing and create a type. It will be multi-factor resolver, and the verification ID will be a string. Take verification ID and resolver. Let's now build this page. We are going to integrate the code component, the component that's helping us to get the code information, and we are going to create an async function, and we'll call it getCode. And the code will be a string, and inside of the code we are going now to check if the user filled the correct code. Okay, we are going for that to create another function to our authentication file. Let's create that function. We'll call it will be an async function. We'll export first the function async function. We'll call it verify user and wallet. This function will take into its parameter two information. The first information will be the verification of the multi-factor authentication. It will be verification ID, that is a string, and the resolver, that is a multi-factor resolver. And the second parameter, it will be the verification code, that is a string. Okay, and inside of our function, we are going to distract our verification, and we get the verification ID and the resolver. After that, we are going to get the credential, inside that credential we are going to execute phone of provider, that credential, and inside we are going to put the verification ID and the verification code. I'm going to get the multi-factor assertion, that is the result of phone multi-factor assert generator dot assertion, and we are going to get credential. So if I'm going to execute the resolve signing, it will take into parameter multi-factor assertion, and if everything is going well, we are going to return true. Otherwise, we are going to catch the error and to return false. Get back to our code signing. Now we can execute this we can continue with this function. Okay, so we are going to get the response from this method, verify user wallet. Inside this method, we are going to pass the verification ID and the resolver, and the second parameter will be the code. If the response is true, we are going to redirect our user to the user page. For that, let's first get the instance of the router from user router of Nextjs, and here we are going to use with the router that push user page. Otherwise, we are going to notify the user that something went wrong. So let's test this into our navigator. Okay. As you see, they say something went wrong again. What you have to do here, instead of just writing something went wrong, we need to call Enrolling multi-factor authentication and to get back the response. Okay. And we have to do the same here. Cool. I'm going to repeat again. I'll refresh, I will reload my page. After that, I'll click again on login with Google. And this time, I should verify my phone number to see the code I have received. I receive a code. Let me fill the code. As everything is correct, I'm now connected. As you can see, I have completed 2 steps before to be connected. So, if I try to do the same thing with an email and password provider, I will encounter an error. That error will tell me that the email should be verified first. In the last part of this video, I will show you how to verify the user email. So the user will be able also to activate the second factor authentication. Let's continue. I will get back here. So if there is a current user and the current user have not an email verified and the current user is not enrolled yet, in that case, we have to verify his email address. What you are going to do, we are going to send the email to that email address so the user can verify his email. Let's do that. To do that, I will create a new function to my authentication first. I will go to authentication and I will create a new function, async function, and I will call it verify user email. So I will get the user and I can send email verification to the user. If everything is okay, I can return true, but if something went wrong, I can return false. And in this case, it will be a promise boolean. Cool. So here, what we are going to do, we are going to implement a button. I've just put a button and I written verify your email. And this button, I will create a function. On click that function, I will say that is send email. Okay, let me create that function to be an async function, send email, and I will get a response. Verify user email here, and I will use current user. That's current user. In my case, I have just to check if the current user exists, so I can execute that inside. Okay, great. So if the response is true, I can notify the user that an email has been sent to your email address. Sent. It's more simple. Else, we can use notify to say something went wrong. Okay, and we are going to test this if everything is going correctly. If the user used his email and password, he will see first verify your email. After that, he will be able to see activate the multi-factor authentication. Let's try that. I will close the console log. I will disconnect. Let us create a new account. And the password. So I can see verify your email. And I have to click. An email has been sent to you. Let me check my email. So I have a new email. I will click on that. And I see this link to verify my email. And they say your email has been verified. You can now sign in with your new account. I will disconnect from this time. And I will log in into my account again. So here, nothing happened because my under submit here is empty. I have to check if my email current and my password current is not null. So in this case, I will execute login with email and password, and inside I will provide the email and the password. Current dot value. I will do the same here. Dot current dot value. Right. So let me check login with email and password. I have to check that here on my page if everything is correct. Yeah. Okay. Let's repeat again. Now we can click on login. You can see activate the multi-factor authentication. I'm going to activate that. I have to fill my code. My code can fill in, and everything is set. Let me try to disconnect and to reconnect again. I can connect into my account. And this time I have to provide the code before to log in into my account. Let's provide this code. Everything is set correctly. In this video, we have seen how to implement Firebase multi-factor authentication in Nextjs. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to like this video.